All right, so welcome to, what day is today? Thursday. Welcome to Thursday. We're getting close to the weekend. One more day. I will remind you very quickly off the top. So we're gonna have a quiz tomorrow, and here's how it's going to go. So if you are an in-class student, which of course you all are, and maybe some of you who are online today are in-class students. If you're an in-class student, I would like you to come in tomorrow and write a paper test, just like normal, just like pre-COVID. Come in and write the paper quiz. For those of you who are exclusively online, like if you're not in Vancouver or not in Canada, we'll do an oral quiz. So I'll set up a meeting in Microsoft Teams, and I'll have you come in one by one, and I'll ask you a question or two, and you can tell me what you know. And again, because I can't do both of those things at the same time, what we'll do is we'll do the oral quiz first. So at 8 o'clock Pacific time, people who are online will do the oral quiz. And so for you guys who are in class, you guys are going to start at 9, and so you get to sleep in a little bit tomorrow morning.
Who will hear all the questions?
What's that?
Who will hear all the questions?
Well, I wonder if they'll be the same.
They'll be the same?
I wonder. I wonder. So that's how we'll do it, okay? So I'll be in this room, from 8 o'clock. I'll probably have the door closed. 8 o'clock, I'll be doing the oral quiz, and then at 9 o'clock, you guys can come in, sit down. You can write your quiz, and then I think you can probably go after that. So it'll be an easy day or easy morning for you tomorrow with me.
The class at night, right?
What's that?
We'll enter the class at night.
Yeah. Yeah, and that will allow me to quiz everybody, and whether they're here or whether they're not. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Is sleeping in an hour okay?
No.
It's not okay? Because I'll take an extra hour right now. Huh?
I'm good.
You're good with it? Okay. So that's what we'll do tomorrow, okay? So I'll do the online people first, and then you guys can show up here at 9, write your quiz, and then should be good to go. Cool? Cool.
Will it be easier than online?
What's that?
Will it be easier, like, you don't get prepared?
Well,
Because online they have the advantage of not writing it.
well, sometimes there's an advantage to not writing it, but sometimes that's more difficult, right? If you have to just say it, right out of your head. So, some people might find it easier, some people might find it more difficult. Obviously I'm trying to keep things equal and even as much as I can, but we also have to deal with the fact that some people are on the other side of the planet. So.
Will you do the last time we did in the last semester?
Uh-huh.
So, after we finish the test, we'll do it again with our friends.
Oh yeah.
Get some marks.
Yeah, we're not going to do that because again, not everyone is here, and so it doesn't work, unfortunately. Lots of things don't work the way they used to anymore, and that's one of the things that doesn't work. So can't do it. Okay, so whoops. So Michaela's here. Good morning, Michaela. Hadil is here. Good morning to you. And Kevin is here. Good morning, Kevin. Ananda's here. Morning, Ananda. And Ryan is here. Good morning to you. And Ayushi's here. Good morning. Yeah, okay. Let's go to where we were yesterday. So we were talking about the Roaring 20s yesterday, right? And they were roaring for, and Shania's here this morning too. Good morning, Shania. The 20s were roaring for a couple of reasons, right? So particularly in the US, the economy is really kicking off. We saw in the film yesterday that it took a little while for the economy to get back on its feet again, right? So there were all those soldiers overseas. Women were working in factories. Those factories were producing all kinds of stuff for the war. And then boom, the war is over, right? So it takes a little while for industry and factories to switch over and stop building, guns and start building vacuum cleaners, right? You can't do that in a day, right? That takes a little bit of time to switch over. So a lot of these men that are coming back, initially they don't have jobs waiting for them, right? But as the 20s move on, 1921, 22, 23, the economy starts to ramp up, manufacturing starts to ramp up, people are employed, and we see all kinds of exciting things happening. So it's a fun time to be alive if you're, living in the United States. And I would argue, particularly if you're the age you all are at. I don't think for the U.S. in the 20s, I don't know that. I don't know that there's been a period of sort of American and Canadian history where, the culture has been changing so fast, right? Like I know we're kind of used to technological change and cultural change here, but so much was happening and so much was rapidly shifting. I'm not sure that any of us have really experienced that kind of exciting time where, you know, things are just going up and up and up and up. But I'm not sure. I don't know what your experiences are. Yeah, so the Roaring Twenties became a thing, right? Where it was loud, there was lots of partying going on, and dancing and jazz music, and so the party was roaring, but also the economy was kind of roaring at the same time, right? So all kinds of excitement, activity, economic production, partying, drinking, dancing. Radio was new. People were listening to radios, right? People were reading magazines, and fashion became a thing for the first time. Prior to the Roaring Twenties, you had your work clothes, and you had your one, formal dress or suit that you wore to church. That's what people wore. But in the 20s, fashion becomes a thing, right? People start designing outfits just because they look good, and people start buying different types of clothes because they might want to be fashionable. So even something that we take for granted now, like fashion, in 1900 really wasn't a thing. There was really no such thing as fashion. Fashion is kind of born in the 1920s, as are many other things. So yeah, we were looking at this documentary yesterday and trying to look at how technology has led to social and economic and political change here in the 20th century. And so we're seeing definitely some of that social and cultural change here in the documentary. So we started watching this yesterday, and I asked you 3 questions. That third question, I think I might have been thinking of another documentary I showed to people in the past where they actually interviewed people who were there. In this one, they don't seem to do that. So we probably don't have to. We probably don't have to do number 3 or worry about number 3 because it's not really useful. But I might ask you something else. Good morning, Mohammed. I might ask you something different at the end of this documentary. Okay, let me see. Yesterday in the documentary, what kind of social or cultural changes did we see happening? Yeah, yeah. Partying was a thing, right? People of course went to, social gatherings before the 1920s, but often they were like church picnics and really sort of formal affairs. But here, things get a little out of control, right? It's kind of a dancey nightclub, boozy sort of environment, which is kind of a new thing, right? What else? Jazz became a thing, right? So we should probably mention that jazz kind of comes from Black America. It comes out of the South, but it's sort of they sort of create this form of music themselves, and then it's kind of borrowed by white guys, and then it becomes popular. The reason I mention this is because the same thing will happen with rock and roll in the 1950s. Black musicians will kind of invent rock and roll, and then guys like Elvis Presley will kind of borrow it and make it popular. So the same thing happens in the 20s with jazz, but jazz is new. Aliana, what were you going to say?
Women started working.
Right. So women's freedom women sort of continue to push for more, I guess the previous boundary of freedom and what they're allowed to do, right? So not only during the war do women, leave the home and get factory jobs and earn money, but now they're out there drinking and smoking and, yeah, wearing short dresses and short hair.
Homosexuality was finally accepted.
Scandalous. Homosexuality was accepted?
Yes, for women.
Ooh.
They shouldn't have filmed the two women were.
I don't think they were. I don't think they were together. I think it might be still a little early for that.
I think they actually said that.
What?
They said they're allowed to. They can express their sexuality.
Yeah, they can explain.
And they're-
Yeah, but I don't know that they were expressing it with each other. I think they were. I think they were friends. I don't think they were involved.
It means like, there was, like, they dress up and all, change.
Say again?
Like, they dress up, change a lot,
Mm.
and then their hair changed,
Yeah.
and they shouldn't drink beer, smoke.
Definitely, yeah. But yeah, so they can definitely express their sexuality, which they're doing with their dancing and their fashion. I don't know that they were necessarily lesbians. It's possible, but I don't think that's what they meant. I think it was just it was still a little early for that to be accepted. I think you've got to get to the 60s before people actually start coming out of the closet, and even that's very early. So here in the 20s,
They don't even realize it.
people might have known about it, like there may have been, women who lived with their friends, and people might have gossiped and whispered about it, but it definitely wasn't out in the open. There were certainly gay people during that time, but their visibility in society, I would say, would be almost zero. It's still just a little early for that in the United States anyway.
Voting.
Yeah, women are voting, and women are running for political office, right? So they're
People were,
so they're entering into the political sphere, right, for the first time. Other social and cultural things. Say what? Right. I'm going to stick that in number 2 with transportation technology, but very true. What do you think those cars and those new roads allow people to do? Like, how might that change their activities?
interact
You can interact more. You can go faster to places, right? So maybe you've got more free time in your day because you don't have to walk 20 minutes to the store. You can just zip over there in your Model T, right? What else? What else might people be able to do on the weekend now that there are cars and roads? What's that?
Go to picnics.
Yeah, they can go to picnics. They can get out of town for the weekend.
They can go to Miami to see some kind of hurricane.
I know there's a big hurricane. Yeah, so again, this is the age of leisure as well, right? It's beginning. And so before that, Americans have a pretty strong work ethic. They don't take vacations. There's no such thing as leisure. There's no such thing as self-care or treat yourself or anything like that. It's all a very kind of work-centered and, church-centered kind of existence. But now people are like, hey, holidays, leisure, let's get out of town for the weekend. And so people hop in their cars and drive on those new roads, and they go out of town and they stay at maybe a little hotel or bed and breakfast in the country, right? And they have a little mini holiday on the weekend, right? Brand new. Nobody's done that before, but it's new for the 20s. What else? The what? Oh, there was the Ku Klux Klan, right? Not new for the time because they show up in the 1800s, but there's a resurgence of KKK activity, right? And so as some Black Americans start to enter the workforce and become wealthy and increase their standard of living, as social and cultural norms start to shift, The KKK, who is very traditional and conservative and racist, they start to sort of rise again and start to push back against this, right? And so you will often see white supremacists kind of show up when at times of social or cultural change. And so they'll show up again in the 1960s with the civil rights movement. To some degree, we're seeing white supremacists crop up around the edges of this Black Lives Matter movement, right? We see as Black Americans are sort of pushing for justice and equality and addressing the systemic racism in the US, we see white supremacists sort of pushing back against that. And so every time you see sort of one side rise up, the other one will rise up to meet it, right? And so this is a time where society and culture is shifting. Black Americans are able to raise their standard of living and gain more power and money, and so the KKK is there to oppose that, right? Okay, communication and transportation technologies. What have we mentioned?
They had radio.
Cars. They had radios.
Oven.
They had what?
Oven.
Ovens. Yeah, ovens.
Washing machine.
Washing machines.
Vacuum cleaner.
Vacuum
electric
cleaners.
fridge,
What's that?
Electric fridge.
Electric fridges. Yeah, and Helen's here too. Good morning, Helen. And radios is first airplane. Yeah, so airplanes are invented in 1911 or successfully, but by the 20s they are, they've been used in war. And of course who do we see fly across the Atlantic?
Some guy who just came out of flight school.
Some guy who just came out of flight school. Do you remember his name? Yeah, so this is a bigger deal for American history than it is for world history, but it's Charles Lindbergh. So he gets in his airplane, the Spirit of St. Louis, gets in there with a warm jacket and 5 ham sandwiches, and it was a simpler time, and flies across the Atlantic, right? Proving that airplanes can go across the Atlantic. And of course, yeah, and huge amounts of people showed
How
up
come
to,
he had so much fuel?
huh?
How come he had so much fuel on the
How much is? Well, he planned for it, right? Like you can mathematically figure out how much fuel you need, and he probably had extra gas tanks and all kinds of things.
Planes do fly over the Atlantic.
Well, they do now, but at the time they did not.
What I was saying about the fuel.
The fuel thing? Yeah. Well, at the time planes probably wouldn't have a fuel tank that was big enough to do that because no planes ever flew that far. So.
You never thought of it.
I bet you the whole back of that plane was fuel tank, or there were extra fuel tanks to make sure he made it. But yeah, so he makes it. What do we? Okay, so we got radios, we've got cars, we've got the airplane, we've got all of those sort of consumer goods. The other thing we should probably mention too is that what's that? Sports, yes. Sports, well, I guess that's more of a cultural thing, but sports become more popular as people can actually listen to the game while it's happening, right? Before, if you didn't actually go to the New York Yankees game, the only way you knew what happened was to read it in the paper the next day, which is not that exciting, right? But now you can listen to it while it's happening, right? Wow, right? We're all like, whatever. But of course, at the time, it's exciting, right? That you could never do this before. And so, super exciting. The other thing I should mention too, yeah?
Something, the moving manufacturing lines,
Yeah,
what Ford?
Henry Ford.
Yeah, Henry Ford.
Yeah, Henry Ford pioneers the moving manufacturing line, right? So instead of a bunch of guys standing around building a car, you've got the cars that are moving by these guys, and these guys do the same job all day, right? Maybe they're just putting on 2 wheels on one side, and that's all they do all day, right? So boring, yes, and there's something to be said about working conditions and how satisfying it is to work in a factory and do the same thing over and over all day long, but it does speed up production, right? And speeding up production means more cars, but also cheaper cars, right? Cars that maybe the average American can afford, whereas before, only the very rich could have an automobile, right? I should mention, though, the other thing is all of those consumer electronics that we talked about, vacuum cleaners and fridges and radios and all that stuff runs on electricity. And electricity is kind of new in this period as well. Lots of homes prior to the First World War actually don't have electricity. And why would you, right? Because nothing in your house would have run on electricity. And people, when it got dark, you went to bed. Or you used an oil lamp or candles, right? Probably an oil lamp. Lots of those older homes had oil lamps. But at the beginning of this period, people actually start to get electricity, right? They actually get electric lights. And then, of course, once people have electricity in their homes, then they can buy all this other stuff too, right? Ovens and vacuum cleaners and all sorts of things. So electricity is a big technology that's not invented in this period, but of course it becomes widespread, and cities are wired for electricity now. Anything else? Man, there's a lot going on in this period. We're only halfway through. We're at like 1925. It's only been 5 years. All this stuff has happened already. Okay, so what we'll do, good people, is if you're online, I'll let you watch the rest of the documentary, and if you go to the History 12 team and look at my post from yesterday, you'll see the link for the video there. And so yesterday we watched, did we watch 35 minutes of it total? Yeah, yesterday we watched 35 minutes total. So what we'll do is, let me just do some quick math here. 35, 45, so 13. So we'll meet back here in 25 minutes, online people, okay? So we'll watch the rest of the documentary from 35 minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back here, okay? So I'm gonna put 25 minutes on the clock here. I'm gonna release you to go and watch the rest of the video, and we will do the same in class, and I'll see you in a bit.
Proves that flight is the future of travel. Congress awards Lindbergh the Medal of Honor, and the following year he becomes Time magazine's first ever Man of the Year. For 3 months he tours the country visiting every state. 1 in 4 Americans sees Lindy on his Guggenheim tour. The Hines family from Portland, Maine is among them. On July 24th, they capture Lindbergh's arrival in Portland in a home movie. The Hines have profited from creating a successful hand cream business. A new generation of women wanting their product and the power of mass production has made them and others rich and utterly transformed America. There are now 20 million cars crowding into American cities. Accidents become common as pedestrians have to learn to watch out for cars, and vice versa. There's no such thing as a driver's test. Faced with this new threat to public safety, authorities turn to innovation, like the traffic light, as seen here on New York's Fifth Avenue. Soon, traffic cops and stop signs begin to appear throughout the country. Still, fatalities increase from 12,000 in 1920 to over 30,000 by the end of the decade. Education campaigns try to highlight the dangers by putting totaled cars on display, some even shaming the drivers. In Portland, Maine, the Hines family shares in the national tragedy. Their son, William, is seen here in home movie footage at age 5 in 1924. A year later, a Ford Model T strikes and kills him on Vaughn Street. He's the 4th boy in the area to be struck by a car within 24 hours. But car culture isn't the only trend shaping the country. A soaring economy has construction reaching for the sky. In Manhattan, a series of ambitious skyscrapers rise up, each competing to claim the title of tallest in the world. The Chrysler Building becomes the first man-made structure to breach 1,000 feet. It's a leading example of Art Deco architecture that remains iconic to this day. This is rare footage of its famous eagles being installed on the 61st floor. Like the Statue of Liberty, they're thinner than they seem. The working men who construct the buildings, known as roughnecks, are a special breed.
Pretty high up there.
They work without harnesses, safety ropes, or hard hats, spending 8-hour shifts in the clouds with no bathroom breaks. Workers fling red-hot rivets by hand through the air. These jobs are so dangerous that 2 out of 5 fall to their deaths or end up disabled. Across town on 34th Street, construction begins on an enormous 102-floor office building, intended to be a symbol of New York's wealth and power. Former New York Governor Al Smith actively promotes the construction.
As fast as human ingenuity, brains, and ability can bring it about, there will tower on this corner the Empire State Incorporated, the largest office building in the world.
But the boom is a bubble about to burst. Nearly 80% of goods are bought on credit. Most Americans have no savings at all. Consumers are stretching themselves thin. And with a runaway bull market, few realize what's about to come. The skyscrapers crown a hollow economy that is about to spin dangerously out of control. In 1927, much of America looks like smooth sailing. Like the mighty Mississippi, the country seems to be flowing toward a prosperous future. For generations, Americans have built their livelihoods along their longest river, stretching more than 2,300 miles from northern Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. The river offers jobs, food, and a distinctive way of life, all protected by a system of levees that aim to control the river's flow. But nature is about to show the limits of human intervention. 8 months of extreme rainfall swell the river to unprecedented levels. Then, on April 21st, the waters burst through the levees. The devastation is staggering. An area the size of New England, over 70,000 square miles, is underwater. 1,000 are dead, mostly black families. 700,000 are homeless, and there are more than $1 billion in damages. This is the U.S. Army Signal Corps footage of the aftermath. In all, 10 states are affected, with a fifth of Arkansas underwater. Nevertheless, President Coolidge refuses to commit federal money to help. He believes disaster relief is the job of charities and private business, not government. Temporary camps are set up in the disaster zone. But many opt to migrate north rather than to stay and try to rebuild. The Great Mississippi Flood serves as a warning of how fast fortunes can change. But for much of the country, the good times keep rolling along. Wall Street is booming. Trading volumes are so high that in 1928, the New York Stock Exchange introduces tickers that can print 500 characters a minute, twice as fast as before. Millions of investors are out to get rich quick, often by borrowing money and buying on margin. For the first time, Americans can buy now and pay later. But the market gains are driven by optimism, not on the strength of the companies. Few worry. As long as there are buyers, it seems like a license to print money. By September 1929, the Dow Jones has tripled since 1924. It seems like the bull market will last forever. What most investors don't know is there are too many goods to sell. Total car sales have dropped 30%. In Detroit, unsold cars pile up in scrapyards. At the sound of the opening bell on Thursday, October the 24th, 1929, there are no buyers, only sellers. The market falls by 11%. In 2 hours, $9 billion is lost. Terrified banks recall payment from traders who have borrowed money. Most can't pay, leaving the banks in crisis. On Tuesday, the 29th, the New York Stock Exchange goes into a total spiral. Brokers beg to sell at any price. It comes to be known as Black Tuesday. $25 billion evaporate almost overnight. This isn't just about Wall Street. Banks will shut down all across the country. $140 billion in savings will disappear. Ordinary people are ruined. Assistant Secretary of Commerce Julius Klein reaches out through radio to restore calm.
That regardless of regrettable stock market gyrations, the position of commerce and industry throughout the country is fundamentally sound.
He's wrong. After the Roaring '20s, Americans will come to know their next chapter as the Great Depression. It's a defining time for a young nation, and she will revive. But the future will not be easy. When the giant Empire State Building opens the following year, it has few tenants.
We are about to officially open the Empire State Building, the largest and most beautiful office building in the world.
It stands lifeless, mocked as the empty State Building. It will take 2 full decades until 1950 before it turns a profit. America's 10-year party has led to a hangover affecting millions. It's the greatest boom to bust in history.
Okay, so as we saw in the documentary just a few minutes ago, there's massive amounts of changes, right? And so social, cultural, economic, America, and other places in the world, but particularly America, is kind of flying high, right? They're transitioning to a new way of life, one that's kind of maybe has some more freedoms, but definitely some maybe more destructive things too. And so we see drinking and dancing and people having fun. We see America becoming a nation of automobile drivers, right? And so that becomes dangerous because, as you saw in the footage there, those streets in America aren't really built for cars, they're built for horse carriages. And so they're quite narrow, and of course, initially there's no traffic lights, and so people are just driving wherever they want to drive, and people are getting run over, and there's no traffic laws, there's no driver's licenses, there's no driver training, there's none of that stuff, right? And so all of those things have to be sort of created and invented and put into place. Maybe I'll ask you quickly here. What do you think it was like to live in that kind of period? I know I've been saying it's exciting, but what do you think? Do you agree, or do you think it would be scary or confusing? Or what's that?
The revolution came.
Yeah, it was a revolutionary period for sure.
Women were happy because that's freedom they never had, which doesn't happen.
One would imagine.
Only white women were happy.
It's true, but one would imagine that women were maybe happier with their newfound freedom.
So if a person from our time goes back there, they'll be bored to death. But yeah, if you're born at that time, you'll probably be excited.
Yeah.
But why the exchange, the market crash?
What's that?
Why the market crash?
Well, that we will get to very shortly. Yeah, it depending on who you were, and of course, looking at the 20s through our present lens, it's not that impressive, right? A radio, ooh, does anyone even listen to radio? Yana laughs. Yeah, nobody listens to radio unless you're like stuck in the car and you maybe don't have your headphones or something, then you might turn on the radio. But of course at the time it's exciting, right? A car nowadays, well, some of us still get excited about cars, but our cars are much cooler than their cars were. But of course at the time, super exciting, right? And again, there's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of economic growth, there's a lot of ideas of progress and America being the best, and so for the U.S. anyway, it's an exciting time for them. I feel like you want to say something.
No, just the thought crossed my mind, but then comes it.
And then comes Germany, yes, but we'll get to that. Okay, so what I'm going to do here. Okay, that was the video, is I want you to read this section. And so you can see it's just a few pages, 86 to 89, and then a few questions on page 94. And so I've put those in Microsoft Teams. If you don't happen to be here in class, you can read them and answer the questions. And we'll probably take those up tomorrow, because what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to shut down my live stream now because I left my power cable at home and my battery is rapidly dying. So I'm going to end the live stream here. People in class will read and answer the questions, and then that's all we'll do for today. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Okay, so people, what's that? Well, I'll deal with that later, but for now I'm just going to shut it down. So online people, read this section of the textbook and answer these questions, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, so bye.